Actual Fluency, episode 37 with Ladan Jiracek.
Welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast, the podcast that gives you the tools and inspiration to learn languages faster and more efficiently. And now your host, Chris Broholm.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast. I am Chris Broholm, as per usual. Today I've got a very special traveling episode for you today. So if you're interested, like me, in traveling and becoming a traveler, I've got just the episode for you. Today I've got Ladan Jiracek on the show, and him and I get into a lot of traveling discussions because he's been traveling to over 80 countries. So he's obviously gathered a lot of information and tips and tricks that he willingly shares with us today. And obviously I got him on the show because language learners are very often interested in traveling, and I know that I myself will be traveling a lot next year and possibly in the many years to come. So I was really excited to pick Ladan's brain on, sort of travel tips and tricks, how to make it cheaper, where to stay, and all these kind of things that we're all wondering about. I also asked him where his favorite spot in the world was, and the answer was kind of surprising. So, listen out for that answer in the interview in just a moment. Before I leave you with the interview, I just wanted to give a little service announcement, and that is that I'll be doing the first Actual Fluency Language Learner meetup, and it's going to be in London, and it's going to be very soon when you hear this. And if you hear this after the 10th of December, I'm afraid it's already too late. But if you want to check out other meetups by Actual Fluency, you can go to actualfluency.com/meetup. And I'm going to do one next summer in Athens, Greece. And, there might be others along the way. So keep an eye out on that page. But for the London one, it's going to be on the 10th of December. And we're going to meet on 6 p.m. at night. 6 p.m. at night, that was kind of a double whammy there, but it's at 6 p.m. and we're going to meet in central London in a pub called Montague Pike. And it's not a great, high quality luxury pub, and it's actually part of the Wetherspoons pub chain, so anyone can afford a beer in there. And when I lived in London, I used to go to Wetherspoons a lot. They're a great kind of a cheap pub chain over there. So if you see a Wetherspoons, you know that you can get it a little bit cheaper. But we're going to meet up and we're going to talk about language learning, talk about what's going on, and just practice some languages. If anyone is studying Russian or speaks Russian, I'd be happy to talk to you a little bit with my poor skills, or German or whatever, just come and have fun. There's a few people confirmed already, but even if nobody shows up, I'm still going to be there. So, don't worry about it. But check out actualfluency.com/meetup. And I'm looking forward to seeing you December 10th in London, or maybe next summer in Athens. But for now, here's the interview with Ladan Jiracek about traveling the world. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Actual Fluency Podcast. And on the show today, I've got a special guest. He's the host of the Travel Wisdom Podcast, and he's visited over 80 countries. He's an American who's now living in Germany, and he's learned the German language. And I welcome him now today. So, Ladan Jiracek, how are you doing today?
Sehr gut, danke schön.
Guten Abend, guten Abend.
Ja, guten Abend, genau.
Yeah, we could, of course, have recorded this in German, and a lot of people actually ask me to do the podcast in multiple languages, but I feel like, it's to get the maximum reach, and, I might occasionally do interesting small episodes in other languages. I have a little Scandinavian thing recorded that should go out soon, but as for doing whole podcasts in another language, I think other people have better maybe ability or ideas for that. So for now, we're just in English. But let's get started with a little bit. If you could go back just to tell us a little bit about, how did you start traveling? Because 80 countries must have taken you a while, right? And especially if you're from America. So take us back to when you started to say, I want to see the world, and how you got started doing it.
Well, if I start like that, I was a baby when I started. So as we mentioned before we started recording, was my parents are actually from Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia, and so they emigrated to the U.S. I was born in the U.S., but they just always. I mean, we joke that it's gypsy blood, but I guess actually in Slovakia that's not like a really good joke. It's kind of an offensive thing, but I mean we've always been traveling. So actually, like I remember, or I don't remember, but I guess when I was a baby, we went to Hawaii, and then I remember, or kind of remember, and definitely like saw videotapes and everything like this. We had like a camper, and we lived in Seattle, on the Pacific side of the U.S., the very north. And we actually had a camper, and I don't know how long it was, like 3, 4, or 5 months. But we went with this camper, like on the back of a pickup truck, like a little, I don't know, like portable house. And we went all the way through Mexico, Belize, Guatemala. I think we got to like the Nicaraguan border or something like that. And this is like, so I'm 25 right now, and this is like, 1993 or something like that. So the Contras were going around in Nicaragua. And I mean, my mom's telling me stories like, they're just going along like 10 kilometers an hour, 5 kilometers an hour on this really bad road. And they just see like a bunch of soldiers run across, and they're just like, oh, okay. Wow. So, basically it started really early, and, but and so basically by the time I was 18, I would say I traveled to like, I don't know, 15 countries. We visited the US, or sorry, Slovakia a lot. And then it's like, oh, when we're already there, might as well go to Croatia because it's only like a 6-hour drive or something like this.
Sure.
But really this all really started with a bribe. And my mom, so I was doing engineering school in the US. I was doing my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I was going to do the summer semester because we have 3 semesters over there. And my mom was like, no, that's too much. You shouldn't do that. You should like go traveling or something like that. She's like, I'll buy you a ticket wherever you want to go, just as long as you don't do the semester. I'm like, okay, not going to turn that down. And so I got one of my buddies, actually, who I'd literally met like a month before, and I'm like, hey, dude, do you want to go to Russia with me? And he's like, okay. And literally that quickly, we did this really weird trip. We went to Russia, Greece, and like England, Belgium, France, like the Western Europe stuff, and really liked it. Wow. And then kind of discovered couch surfing in the process, and that enabled things, to be able to travel. Basically, we had a host in Russia. Russian English professor, and so we went and talked to his class, and the thing about Russian English classes is that the class is all girls and all Russian girls, so the quality is really high. And then at the end of it, he was basically saying like, oh well, they want to go see Red Square, who wants to go with? And like everybody raised their hands. So we have a picture actually. It's like 30 girls like escorting us 2 guys, and it's just like, oh, it was wow. Like, I want to do this again. But basically, yeah. So Couchsurfing enabled it. It basically brought the price down, and so you could travel a lot more. And so next year we did kind of the Middle East, and I think we saw something like 12 countries over there. Next year, we went to Africa. We went from Cairo to Johannesburg, so from the north to the south, over a period of about 3 months, again, during the summer semester. And I saw like 17 countries over there. And I mean, so my friend actually, who I was traveling with, he was all about like, we need to get the stamps in every country. So some of the countries are like literally like we spent 2 or 3 days there. Sure. But I mean, I feel like I got a pretty good, I don't know, impression or something like that. So I think if I could go there, I kind of know what to expect. But definitely after a while, after the Africa trip, I'm just like, man, I want to focus longer, and I want to, spend a significant portion of time, at least a week, at least, 2 weeks or something like that. Sure. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Last year I went to Southeast Asia, did that in about 4 or 5 months. And now I've been living in Germany for the last year, and I'm doing my master's here, and it's great because everything's like literally a hop and a skip away. When I interviewed you for my podcast, we were talking about going to the Memrise Takipana and Christmas party in London, and I'm just like, it's literally on a whim. Right. Yeah. And it was like €100 or something like that, which as an American, it's still like, it doesn't go into my head, how cheap it is, to go travel around Europe. Because even in June, I went to Italy, and it's like, oh, I have a week off of school, I'll go to Italy. It's €80 flight. Right. Oh, okay. But in the US, if you go to Italy on a 1 week trip, it's like, man, what drugs is he dealing? Like, how does he have this money?
But once you get here to Europe, you've got the benefits.
Exactly.
Well, that's amazing. And obviously a lot of the people who are listening to the show are very interested in travel as well. And I'm sure that a lot of the things that language learning brings to the, let's say, just say the mind or the just your general attitude is about exploring other cultures. But I understand you took a trip. A lot of people do that, but can you perhaps dive into what made you go back the next year? What was the emotion? Because, I guess a lot of people take trips, particularly if the parents are paying, right? Mm-hmm. But what made you sort of turn it into this recurring theme? What did you see and experience that was so fantastic you just had to keep going?
It was literally just a different way of life. And let me clarify, like that first trip, it was only the plane ticket that was paid for, and then my mom would pitch in like, oh, here's a few $100s for your next trip because I like what you're doing, but otherwise It was me. But I don't know, I just really liked it, and I love talking to different people, and I guess maybe because I was raised in like a more of a multicultural thing, it wasn't just like, oh, you're American, it's like, oh, I'm American, but I'm Slovakian and Czech, and I've been to Europe a bunch, and I've seen the different things. So it felt a little bit more like home, and so that really just, I don't know, resonated with me. And going to the language thing, it's kind of interesting to like feel like a kid. I mean, our first trip was Russia, and I'm telling you, we had a mental breakdown the first day, and it was completely, it might've been the lack of sleep for the last 3 days. And like, but our host picked us up and then dropped us off at Gorky Park. And he's like, oh, I got to go run some things. You guys stay here. And we are just like, oh my God, we're actually here. I can't believe it. And we have the menu in front of us, and we had learned how to read Cyrillic, but we didn't know what it meant.
Right.
It's like reading Turkish. It's like, okay, cool. But I don't know what that means,
Right.
So we're just like, we have no idea. And yeah, meanwhile, these amazingly beautiful women are like rollerblading by us, and we're just completely, I don't know, it's just a new experience every day. And I interview people on my Travel Wisdom podcast, and all the time the people are saying like, you're really alive when you travel. And when you're back at home, you might, throw on your iPod and listen to some music or hopefully some podcasts, right?
Right.
And you go through a routine, and honestly, like if you think about it, like a week later, you don't remember that day. And so literally the entire day just flies by. But this way you can remember every moment. You're like, this one day felt like a week because just so much stuff happened, and it was just so amazing. Right. And it literally made memories for the year. So yeah, and I mean, kind of to focus more on the language stuff, it was absolutely fascinating because so I speak Slovak as well, and when I was there, man, the Russian does not register at all. I was having such problems with it, and I could not speak. I couldn't do anything, and it literally wasn't until I got home that I'm just like, oh, you just changed the h to a g, and then you have 80% of the language. It was unbelievable. and so the language thing, I mean, whenever I went somewhere, I tried to learn at least a few phrases, and people love it, especially Turkish people. Somehow they're just like, they're happy that you do anything. And so you say, even the 10 phrases that you have memorized, it's your best friends forever.
Right. For sure. I think to throw in a bit of Danish here, the great playwright, not really playwright, but author Hans Christian Andersen said that to travel is to live, which I think is a very poetic way of putting it. But it's just I guess you just discovered it from a very early age, and in a way got addicted to it. And I guess a lot of people are sitting out there, well, that's nice. It sounds really great, but how do I do it? So, if I'm sitting here and I don't really have an amazing, bank account or anything, I don't have a lot of resources, can I still go travel like you did? Is there any tricks and tips you can share with the listeners?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, there's lots of travel hacking stuff. So this is mainly for the Americans, but I mean, if you use a credit card or open a credit card and just transfer balances, blah, 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 there's ways to play around with it. And you can literally get free flights and free international, free domestic flights, all this, which for my trips always ended up being about half the cost.
Oh, really?
definitely couch surfing is great as well, for a number of reasons. And so the first one, of course, it's free, or very close to free. You basically you find you go on couch surfing, and you're like, hey, I'm going to be in this city, this is this day, this to this day, and who's willing to host me. So basically, you sleep on their couch, or maybe if they have an extra bed or something like this. And that again, like while traveling, that can literally cut your costs in half. And so it's an amazing thing also because instead of being in a sterile hotel that literally you could be anywhere,
Sure.
You are in a home of a person that actually lives like this way. And so it was amazing. I mean, how people live, and then maybe they introduce you to their friends. Maybe you go to a party or something with them, and you just kind of experience life with them. A lot of times you can practice language with them, actually. I mean, and you can do it both ways. Of course, you can host and surf. But I hosted, actually, was like a month ago. I hosted a Polish and a Russian couple, and their English was so bad, and so I was just practicing my Polish and my Russian with them.
Of course.
And it's an absolute amazing way. I mean, I know that you're learning Russian, and I'm sure there's some, at least a few times a year, a Russian person or a couple or something going through, and you can host them, and you have a live-in language tutor for
Right.
like a few days or whatever. And maybe you can get them to cook. I always get them to cook something nice for me. But, I mean, otherwise it's not that expensive. Like if you play your cards right, and it depends how fast you move, of course. Like if you're in a new place every day versus being in a new place like every 3 days or a week or something like that. When you move slower, it's cheaper, of course. But I mean, it's not that much money, honestly. I mean, for us in the Western world, I would say, for me, I've done it from anywhere from $600 to $1,500 per month.
Right.
So it's, I mean, if you're like, oh, I'm going to go on a 2-3 month trip, it's like, okay, I need $2,000 or $3,000, right? Depending on where you go, of course, and how you travel. But that's not so much. I think that's something people can save up for within a year, for example. And I mean, of course, there's other tricks like working from wherever you are, like remote working, and yeah.
Just one
and you
second.
can teach English. Yeah, sorry.
All right, back now. No more breaks. I just got interrupted by the doorbell, so I had to leave the headset and
Pizza.
yeah, pizza. I had some pizza, which I'll eat in a moment. But first, we need to get back to this nice talk we were having about. We were trying to find out how people can travel or get into traveling, I guess, because it's like language learning. If you don't know anything about it, it might seem impossible, or at least quite complicated and expensive. So we just shared some tips about how you can save money by staying with people. And you talked about, travel hacking, which you can put into Google, and you'll find these big travel hacking blogs, I'm sure. But what about, do you have any other tips for people how to get into traveling, sort of, what do you need to know about a region before you visit it? Do you do any research up front?
Yeah, I do.
Except for language, of course. Sorry,
yeah. A big tip, by the way, I've heard some problems is Brazil does not speak Spanish; it speaks Portuguese.
Right.
Right. So I've heard about some people like, oh, I've been learning Spanish for 4 years and to study to go to Brazil, and I'm just like, sorry, bud.
Right.
But generally, I do a little bit of research before, and there's definitely like some favorite regions that I've always liked, but it's just some general impressions. I would say it's less than 20 hours of research before I go, because I like to kind of keep it spontaneous as well. But definitely what I would recommend too is a Lonely Planet guidebook, and that's always helped for me.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes people like consider it like a Bible and they're glued to it, and so you don't get actually like off the beaten track because you just go to the things that they recommend.
Sure.
But I've missed some really cool things. For example, in Syria, I missed some really great ruins just because we didn't know about it. We didn't talk to the right people, and I'm kicking myself now because, well, it's going to be a few years before Syria is going to be open again, right? So,
Right.
But yeah, that's basically it. And I mean, that's the thing is, honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's so, I mean, so many people do it. It's not that hard. It's like living where you are now, but somewhere else. That's pretty much it. And the hardest part is, buying the ticket and hopping on that plane or whatever, and then just committing yourself to it and, not giving up, not going back.
Get it done.
Does that sound familiar?
Yes, exactly. I was just about to say it's just like language learning, and
Yeah.
it's funny that they're so similar, and you can do both at the same time. So that's
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's even
Well,
greater.
I would say, I mean, the traveling has the advantage that it's a little bit harder to bail out. For example, I mean, if you're, in Thailand or something like that, and a flight back would be $1,000, it's a little bit harder to be
Right.
like, I can't handle this. I'm gonna take the $1,000 hit. Versus like language learning, it's like, oh, I just don't have time today. It's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it.
Right.
But with the traveling, you're committed, and that kind of helps out as well.
Yeah, that's cool. And do you have any kind of favorite regions? You obviously went to very different kind of places in the world. What kind of things pop into your mind?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I kind of have, an idea of each place, and there's definitely some that I liked, some that I didn't like. But when people ask, I mean, you have to choose from 80 places, but the one that always comes up is former Soviet Georgia, Gruzia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, south of Russia by Turkey, Armenia, kind of close to Iran-ish, Black Sea area. A lot of people didn't know where it was. Even my family in Slovakia, which is like, they should know, and they're very educated. They didn't know where it was.
Really?
It's like, actually, where is it at again? But that was honestly my favorite place I've ever been to. We had planned to be there for 5 days, and we stayed for 5 weeks.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you an idea. But I mean, it's just amazing. Like, the scenery is so great. Like, it has beaches, amazing mountains, river valleys, just really beautiful, lush green scenery, and it's just so diverse. It has its own language, which is not related to anything. I think your listeners will be interested in this. It's not related to any other language. It's Basque and Georgian are the two languages that are not part of any other like language roots, like the Romanian or like Latin root or Germanic root or something like this. This is like its own separate like island, which is just fascinating to me. And so they have letters like and they have like literally like if somebody's cutting your throat, that's a sound you make for like a letter.
Oh, really?
Like that. And so it's just absolutely crazy. And the script is crazy too. It looks like a Greek omega. So it's just kind of like all loops. And it's as far as I know, it's not related to anything else that I've ever seen. It's absolutely amazing for those reasons.
Right.
And
so if people are looking for a little obscure language challenge, then try. What's it called? Georgian. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure if you learned it, which would be quite difficult, I mean, you'd have a new window into almost 5 million people, which, isn't that much. But man, if you spoke Georgian and then you explained that you're not Georgian, I don't think you could make a better friend in your life. Like, seriously, that person would be so just blown away. Like, you learned Georgian?
Right.
That's unbelievable. But I mean, that gets to my next point, is the hospitality over there from the people is just absolutely amazing. I mean, it's on par with Turkish hospitality because they just like literally, if you want, I can tell you a story, but it's great. And they give you everything, food, wine, alcohol, which gets on to my last point, is the alcohol flows over there like crazy. And back then I drank more than I drink now, but Jesus, it was unbelievable. It was just... So the amount and the cost, the very, very low cost of the alcohol over there is just unparalleled.
Right.
And everybody's always drinking, and it just opens up so many like crazy doors of what you do. And it was just unbelievable.
How do you stay kind of, if you're traveling for, let's say, months at a time, you're not on a holiday, you're not on a vacation anymore. How do you stay away from like just going to the bars every night and just, eating poorly and not killing yourself basically?
That's definitely something I felt like, after like 2-3 weeks, you're like, this is not a vacation anymore. I'm not just relaxing. I mean, actually, my travels are never like relaxing. Actually, I usually come home and, sleep for a few days. Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely an issue I had, especially for the longer ones. I mean, for me, the bars aren't interesting after like 2 days in a row, and so I can't really do that. I can't really go out more than 3 days a week, like to bars and get drunk. And I'm sure that number will decrease as I get older. But really, a big thing for me has always been like staying active and staying useful. So actually a big part of this could be language learning. Like if you're dedicating yourself, if you're like, for lack of a better word, working on something, doing something, I guess productive, then that kind of keeps you sharp. And so it could be like language learning and, or just basically reading or, studying up on a topic or just, formulating ideas. That's kind of what I've been doing. And, for example, when I did the 3-month trip across Africa, like I literally read like 12 books, during that time because we were always in the car. And so I was always reading and it was great. I mean, it was really, I really liked it for that reason.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then you end up in Germany of all places. What made you choose Germany to study in?
Well, I did an internship here 2 years ago in Berlin to see if I liked it or didn't like it. Cause I had always heard about, German engineering and I thought it was like good, engineering and science place. But I'd always heard like, like the Germans are really strict time wise. And it's like, you are 2 minutes late. Why are you 2 minutes late? There is no explanation for this. Absolutely none. You cannot be 2 minutes late.
Wow, that's a good accent, actually.
This is how I speak German, actually.
That's pretty spot on, I would say.
Thank you. But, yeah, so I came and did the internship and actually it was, I didn't like it. I loved it. So I was just like literally counting. I had 1 more year left in my bachelor's, so I had to, finish that up. But I was literally counting down the days of the next year of when I would be able to come back. And so I found this master's program here. It's in English. So, unfortunately my German hasn't progressed as quickly as I thought it would, but, it's been great and I absolutely love it. And it's been, again, I have family here in Slovakia. Mm-hmm. So it's literally like few hour bus ride. I go to Prague, once a month or something like this, and it's great because I'm in Dresden, which is on the eastern bloc, formerly behind the Iron Curtain. Mm-hmm. But so it's been great to see my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and all this, and I've seen them pretty often, like every 3 months or something like this, and it's been great, and also to explore Europe. There's other financial incentives, by the way, as well. It's like 50 times cheaper than the US to do my master's here.
Oh, really?
And yeah, exactly.
Wow.
I mean, in the US, a master's costs like $50,000, and a lot of times you get like sponsorship from a lab or something like this, or
sure.
Something like this. But I would have to be working or be writing, something or do presentations. And here, it's basically $1,000 for the 2 years, or 1,500 or something like this. And it's great. I mean, it's, and then overall it's cheaper. The beer's cheaper. The food's a little bit more expensive, but, basically the two things that I spend the most money on is alcohol and, traveling.
Right.
Is like half the price.
Yeah.
So
you're in the perfect place because you can travel to anywhere from the middle of Europe. So
yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And of course, the German language, did you have any kind of experience with it before you went to your training program, or didn't you learn it until you went back for the full masters?
No, I had learned before. Actually, I did a year of German when I was like 16 in high school. Mm-hmm. But I later found out that was absolutely crap. That taught me nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like looking back, I don't think I even learned past tense, which is just like, how can you exist without knowing past tense?
It's 1 year though, it's such a limited time. You can barely learn anything in the classroom.
That's true. And I've kind of come to believe that the classroom learning is absolutely the wrong way to do it. So I was doing Rosetta Stone when I was doing the internship in Berlin. So I was there for 2 months, and I was doing pretty intensive Rosetta Stone. Well, pretty intensive at the time. It was like, I don't know, 6 to 10 hours a week. But I later found out, I mean, it's good, and it's an expensive program though. Like it can cost you like $500 to $800 for the entire program, unless you know some other ways to get it for free, right? So I did that, and basically. Yeah, but it really wasn't until I came to Germany, and I was just experimenting with a bunch of different methods. Same way you, like, I'm a big fan of the Tim Ferriss, methods and the Pareto's principle, 80-20 rule, and everything like this. And so I was really trying to maximize my hourly output, and it was quite difficult. I tried a lot of things. I feel like I wasted a lot of time. I did a class, and it met I think 5 hours a week or something like that. And it did absolutely nothing.
Oh, really?
They focused on grammar way too much. And I didn't understand it. It felt like I got maybe 5 hours worth of value out of it, or 5 hours worth of learning out of it, even though I was there for like 60 to 100 hours over the course of the semester. And so that didn't work. I thought I'd just like, oh shoot, what's the word? diffusion or just like
you just picked it up.
Yeah, that just me being here, I would pick it up. Oh man, I can't. Anyways, whatever. I can't think of the word. But just osmosis. Sorry, just by osmosis, I'd be picking up the language just by being here and all this. But that really wasn't working. It turns out there's a lot more to it. And so literally, my mom and my brother came visit after like 3-4 months, and they were laughing at me like, nothing. You can barely speak. You don't even ask. You can't even refill your credit at the phone store. Like you don't even know how to ask for that. Like how are you doing it here? So after a while, I started watching shows. That didn't really help that much, but basically, the thing that helped the most for me was Duolingo and Memrise as well. I know you're a fan of that. Actually, I started out with Memrise, and that was great. That's probably the best vocabulary tool. But the thing was, my German vocabulary was pretty good, but I didn't really know some I think they're adverbs. I didn't really know how to use that. And honestly, it was the grammar. Like I finally realized I'm just like, man, I'm gonna have to learn the grammar. It's just no avoiding it in this language. Like maybe Spanish, you can get around with it, and people will understand you, but people were not understanding me at all. Like if I just threw out a bunch of words, they just looked at me and they just didn't comprehend. They would just switch to English, which frustrated me as well. But yeah, so Memrise was great, but the Duolingo was absolutely amazing.
Right.
And I remember when we were talking last time, I was talking about you have a point system in Duolingo, and I was doing pretty good. I was doing like 150 points a day, and I was pretty proud of myself. And then I did a competition with my girlfriend, and whoever can do the most points in 1 week. And so she was doing easier language Spanish, so it was a little bit more difficult for me. But she at Friday night, and I decided not to go out because it was the last day of the competition. I was like, I need to beat her. Right. I'm 600 points behind. I can't believe this. She's literally like tripled my score. This is unbelievable. So I sat down literally like 6 hours, 8 hours, and just did it because I could not lose. Right. And I pumped out like 650 points that day, which, if you remember, that's like 4 times.
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot, and it's quite. I was quite impressed. Unfortunately, she still won.
It's a motivational top tip, nonetheless. That have competitions. If not with yourself, then at least with somebody else. It helps a lot.
Absolutely.
So and you got up to, and now obviously living in the country is a huge advantage. And you use Duolingo and Memrise to kind of start off, and now you've just sort of grown using native material, talking to people, and now you're in a pretty comfortable spot, right?
Yeah, I'm in a really comfortable spot. Actually, last weekend I went to a conference, and it was held all in German actually, and I was doing pretty good. Like I had to concentrate it on a little bit, and so it took energy. But like if somebody was speaking up on stage, it wasn't a problem. Like as long as I focused, I understood everything that they said. But the problem was when people were talking between each other, like during the networking times, that was much more difficult.
Right, they speak faster, and they probably a little bit more colloquial and.
Exactly. But I would say overall my German's quite good, and it's definitely improved. And basically, since I started the Duolingo, which was like 3 months ago, it's literally doubled or even tripled, in my ability to speak and my ability to understand. And now every week it really feels like a new window or new lights going on in a house. It's just like, oh, I didn't know that was there, and I understand it now. This is amazing. And that's such a rewarding experience. I think maybe you or somebody, some language learning website posted like language learning has the same pathways and is as addictive as doing drugs.
Right.
So I've definitely felt that. And so now with the Duolingo, actually, I've kind of like become addicted to it. Just, I guess the best addiction that you can have. It's, it's free, and, you come out ahead on top after it. And so now, during that competition with my girlfriend, I did 600 points, and now I do 600 points 4 times a week. You know? So literally, I finished the entire Duolingo Spanish tree in like 10 days or something like that, which is just absolutely mind blowing for me. And I don't know how much I took away or how much I like gathered from it, but I have the basics. And when I come revisit it, every few days over the next few months, I think that'll definitely help. And I really think it'll just warp speed, light speed, and into the language learning stuff. So that's been great. I think that's really maximized my per hour output of language learning.
Awesome. And of course, you're along the way, acquiring a lot of wisdom. And as I mentioned in the introduction, you have started your own Travel Wisdom podcast, which is the name of it, and also the URL. And can you just give a short kind of like what is behind Travel Wisdom, the kind of the title, and why did you decide to do a travel podcast when there's hundreds of them on the marketplace?
Yeah, sure, great, thanks. I did. I have the Travel Wisdom podcast, which is basically the message or the thesis. The message I want to promote is that traveling speeds up the wisdom that you accumulate. So versus being at home and traveling is, you become much more wise. And this is something I kind of also as I've talked to more and more guests, it's also like traveling can make you more successful in life. So even after you're done traveling, that effect, whatever you learn and everything like this in that time, in that few weeks or months or however long you were traveling, goes on into your later life, and it just absolutely helps it out. I kind of came up with this idea because people always told me, like, I'm 25, but they're like, wow, when you talk, it's unbelievable, some of the stories you talk about, and I would say you're much older, which I took as a compliment. I don't know if I should, but and people were always like, oh, you've done so many experiences, you should write a book. And I'm like, I don't want to write a book. I don't like writing. I like talking though, and I find that much easier. So I decided to do a podcast. I also consume an insane amount of podcasts every week. Actually, now that I've had this podcast app where I can speed up the podcast and listen to it at double speed and everything like this, now I listen to anywhere from 20 to 50 hours of podcasts per week.
Oh, cool. What's the name of the app, just in case anyone wanted to check it out?
It's on, actually my phone's not here right now. It's Podcast Addict, I believe.
Right.
And it's great. I mean, you download all the podcasts right there, and it's great. A little trick as well. I mean, I have it on my Galaxy, Samsung Galaxy, and because it doesn't take up so many batteries, but because I use the phone for so many things, I actually bought a bunch of extra batteries and then like external battery chargers. So I literally carry like 2 or 3 batteries with me, and it's great because then when it goes down to like 0%, you don't have to like be tied to a wall, tied to a plug, and be like, oh, I need to charge this. You can literally click, click, click. Boom, done, and you got 100% again. So that's a little tip, but yeah, it's an amazing app, and just a ton of podcasts, and anytime I find a good one from a guest, I literally download it right away. So I hope your listeners are doing the same thing.
Well, I hope they'll go check it out, because obviously I assume that a lot of them are interested in traveling. They're sitting out there, and there's a lot of interesting topics. And one of the things that I immediately noticed with the episodes you've released so far is that kind of the topics that you talk about is very, there's a lot of difference, a lot of variety. It's not just, oh, how do I find cheap hotels or nice beaches or something, it's quite philosophical at times. And I think people will appreciate that as an addition to what they're already consuming now.
Wow, thank you. That's great. I love this word philosophical applied to my podcast.
No problem. You should put it in your tagline.
I like it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have a huge variety of guests, and basically anybody that interests me and that I think, I guess is worthy to be on there. I actually had you on, so you were worthy.
Well, thank you.
But I've had best-selling authors, millionaires, recurring income specialists, basically life experts, dating coaches, just absolutely anybody that interests me. And if there's an angle from traveling, it's absolutely there. Podcasters, a bunch of them. And, actually tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Chris Guillebeau, which I'm pretty excited about. And so that's probably not going to be published for some time, but just it's amazing.
Stay updated with the travelwisdompodcast.com, and you'll see it.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing some of this travel love with the listeners. I know that I personally want to travel a lot in the next decade or so. So for me, it's also a huge kind of opportunity to get some insider tips from travelers such as yourself, who've been kind of around the world, so to speak. I guess 80 countries kind of counts as that. So thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you all the best with the podcast, and I'll see you soon in London.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect. See you in London.
Bye.
Bye.
thank you for listening to the Actual Fluency Podcast. For more information, be sure to check out actualfluency.com. Until next time, enjoy learning and have a great day.